Hey guys, how are you doing today? Hello and welcome to, I guess this is an audio tutorial video. What you're hearing right now is my voice with zero processing from this device that we're going to be talking about today, with a little bit of gain on the back end of the signal chain over on my audio interface. So today I'm going to walk through how I use the DBX 286s and why I think a lot of streamers would benefit from it, and even maybe a few tips here and there for live streamers' audio setups, because live streaming is fundamentally different as far as audio is tackled than something like voiceover. Everything is different. The way that you would want your voice compressed, the way that you want your voice processed, it's all different. So we're going to go ahead and tackle this bit by bit. Although I suppose I should start by explaining what a DBX 286s even is to begin with. It's a microphone processor. And it takes, I'm not going to be able to get the back end of this thing. I'm not going to be able to get a picture of it. But essentially, if we look at the front here, you see a whole lot of knobs. You got a preamp here, compressor. Got to go over my cable here. You got the Deesser, an enhancer, an expander, and then your output. And let's just set this right back down over here. That processes your audio in real time. So my microphone is plugged into my DBX 286s, and that is processing my audio, or it would be if I was using it that way right now. And then it sends it to my interface. Now, there's a lot of advantages to using hardware processing solutions as opposed to software. Back in the day, I was using a Rode Procaster, which, by the way, didn't fit my voice whatsoever. Not a bad mic, didn't fit my pipes. And I was using VSTs integrated in OBS, or using Reaper VSTs in OBS to process my voice, so software solutions. The issue is that there was no instant playback, so as I was speaking, if I wanted to hear how I sounded, I either had to listen to myself play back through OBS on a bit of a delay, or I had to do recording tests constantly to configure my settings properly. And then with things like the GoXLR, I've not had anybody that I personally know talk to me that has hated owning that. I don't personally have one yet. I hope to get one. But I like to be able to just fiddle around with these knobs and not really think about, I don't have to alt-tab from whatever program I'm on while I'm live streaming. I just gotta, I sound a bit too bassy, turn that down just a hair, and immediately hear the difference in here. GoXLR is another software solution, and I can't speak to its quality. However, I can tell you, I can speak to the convenience of having the DBX, and honestly, I feel like if I went to GoXLR, I would probably be pairing it with hardware solutions anyways, just because I like the way that I've been able to make myself sound on the DBX. So we're going to go ahead and start off with step one, which is, I was going to say preamp, but connecting your DBX 286s to your interface. Now, my interface has what's called an insert port, and a lot of interfaces have insert ports, but a lot of them don't. And essentially what that does is it's a port that allows you to send the signal from your interface out to something like the DBX, and then the DBX here would send the signal back to your interface. It's a very convenient way of doing it. You only need the one Y cable. However, there is an issue either with the line level input on my DBX or with the insert port on my Behringer UMC 404 HD, so I'm actually connecting it to my interface more like a cloud lifter. My microphone is plugged into the DBX with an XLR cable. The output from the DBX then is sent out via a 1/4-inch cable to an XLR port on my interface, and that's how I have it all connected. Now we'll move on to the first step in, I guess on the DBX, which is, wrong screen, boop, there we go, thank you, move transition, the preamp. So when you're configuring your preamp here, first of all, you've got your -20, -10, 0, and clip. So when you're kind of fiddling around with this a bit, you want to make sure that at your normal speaking voice, you are lighting up the 20 and or the 10, but that only when you get emotive are you even hitting that yellow. You want to have headroom. Headroom is extremely important here, especially because the compressor, which we'll talk about in a moment, is going to increase the overall volume of the signal you're putting out. So I like to keep mine about -20 to -10. And I guess another thing to note here, different microphones are going to require different amounts of gain. And currently I'm using a dynamic microphone, the Electro-Voice RE20. I know that it requires quite a bit. I mean, we're above 45, 45 decibels of gain. You've got the SM7B, notoriously takes a ton of gain. So, just remember, your microphone is unique, right? There is no this goes for almost everything here. Between variables like your microphone, your voice, the room that you're in, a whole bunch of different stuff, there is no industry standard for how to process audio as a Twitch streamer. I'm going through this basically to give you a baseline, kind of just baseline information, things that you could apply to your own DBX setup if you ever went out and grabbed one. Now, you'll notice here there is a phantom power button. This is a dynamic microphone, thus does not require phantom power to operate. So we don't hit that button at all. And then there's also the 80 Hertz high-pass filter. What this does is, and I don't have the microphone's onboard high-pass filter engaged either, and I'll kind of explain the differences between the two of them. So the 80 Hertz high-pass filter, you engage that, and you kind of immediately hear that the signal is a bit tighter. It's what this is doing is it's taking anything at or below 80 hertz, and it very sharply falls off. I think it was like -18 decibels per octave or something like that. And this is great for if you're dealing with like a rumbling situation. You have a highway next to your house, and you don't want the semis driving by you to get picked up. So it's a nice solution. However, for my personal setup, I don't like it. This is once again relatively subjective. If you like the sound, if it works for your environment, that's great. However, I have heard a rule of thumb that I feel like I need to disagree with about high-pass filters. So my microphone, I guess let me see about popping back over to this screen. You can't really see it. You can kind of see the black bar here. Some of your microphones are going to have built-in high-pass filters. And something that I've heard from people is that you always want your high-pass filter closest to the source. So the general rule of thumb would be use the high-pass filter on your microphone as opposed to the one on your preamp. I'm not an audio engineer. I want to make that very clear. However, you need to look at what the high-pass filters are actually doing to the signal. You can hear it. I'm going to go ahead. If you're wearing headphones, you'll be able to tell the difference. I'm going to hit the high pass on the DBX. And this is now what I sound like. There's a bit of a difference there. Now, the biggest difference to me is that, you lose out some of the... you're losing out on the lowest of the low frequencies, those rumble frequencies. But you're not really losing out on bass. The bass is still there. So we're going to take that off of there and activate the one built on the microphone. You can tell they're not doing the same exact thing. Functionally, they're trying to do the same exact thing, but they do it in two different ways. Where that is an 80 hertz high-pass filter that has a very steep fall-off when you get below 80 hertz. This right here is a 400 hertz shallow high-pass filter, comparatively shallow. They affect the signal and thus will affect the way that you sound differently. So, once again, there is not an industry standard if you're talking about Twitch streaming for how to configure this. So, if you get people from the voiceover community that try to give you advice from the perspective of voiceover work, it doesn't always necessarily apply, because you're also mixing your microphone. You're mixing your microphone against, your music that you're playing on your stream, the game that you're playing, Discord. There's other variables involved that people who are doing voiceover don't have to deal with. When they're recording raw feeds, they're recording a raw feed on their microphone, and then processing it in software. It's fundamentally different than other kinds of audio work. So that is why I implore you to look into what filters and such are doing. Don't take the advice of always filtering closest to the source. You need to know what it's doing to your signal. And I guess on that same tangent, there is something about the DBX that is a relative drawback, and that is that the compressor comes before the EQ. It's my personal preference to compress after I equalize, and there's no way to change it on the DBX short of using the insert on the DBX to send it to an outboard EQ, like, what is it, the DBX 231, which I have got one on the way, so more on that at some other time. But this is the compressor. Now, I'm going to have to turn down my voice for a moment, because when you turn the drive knob, this basically influences the amount of gain reduction that's being done. Because the purpose of a compressor is to take the spectrum of your levels and kind of squish them together so that when you're whispering, you can still be heard. But when you scream, which if I was up next to the microphone when I did that, I probably would have peaked, you don't peak. You're making yourself less offensive to the ears of your viewers over on Twitch, which is super important. Audio is extremely important. The ears are about as sensitive as any sense can be. I mean, the only thing that could arguably be worse is if you could smell the streamer that you were watching. So, you want to make sure that you're sounding decent to your viewers. And by the way, that doesn't mean getting a microphone this expensive. You can use the DBX with like an AT2020 and it would still make it sound incredibly good. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn down the mic on my interface quite a bit. And then we're going to start turning up the drive. And you can immediately hear that it's going to work. Now you have this gain reduction meter. Once again, this is relatively subjective. However, what I like to do is I like to have the drive hover around 5. But the density determines the speed that the compressor moves at. And what I found is that for a more natural sound, lower density is better. And to give you an example, I have seen the recommendation of going low on drive and very high on density, this is actually relatively okay. If you're looking at like radio applications, you can tell the density, the compressor is moving very fast. It's great for like kick drums, or I think it was it snares and kick drums. But for the voice, I prefer the more smooth, natural sound, and you don't want to overdo it on your drive. You will start to sound fucking ridiculous if you overdo it on your drive. So we're gonna turn that down just a hair, or I guess just a whole head of hair, down to about 5. We'll keep this hovering between 2 and 3. And that, to me, is a bit more of a natural, smooth sound. The compressor isn't as noticeable, but still, when I'm quiet, I can be heard a bit better. And when I'm loud, it doesn't quite destroy the ears of my viewers. So, that's fantastic. Let's go ahead and move on to the Deesser. That is a Deesser. Oh, crap. I'll cut that out, I think. So this is the last kind of section of the whole processing area, and we're going to start over here on the Deesser. So what this, by the way, I just want to make this very clear. Not all of you are going to have to use this. In fact, most of you probably aren't going to have to use this. But essentially what this does is it takes sibilant signals, the S sounds, S, and it deadens them. So you take your frequency, and for the voice it's between 2 and 4K most of the time. I guess on my voice that's what I've noticed. And you turn your threshold up, and you'll notice, see, this starts to pop up. What you do not want is the red light, because it begins to sound very unnatural, and you'll even find yourself cutting the S's out entirely, which isn't what you want to do at all. So right about there is usually where I go. You know, it also takes care of like sounds, duh, although duh, I guess doesn't really pop up there, but that's one that can pierce the ears. You know, that's what I would use. However, for my voice, I don't usually, or for my voice and microphone, I don't really need, I don't really need the Deesser on. And another thing to note, there is a level at which the green light will turn on and the red light barely does. Turn it down just a bit from there. If the red light's being engaged at all, turn it down just a hair. That's my general advice. Now we're going to get to the part that I fucked up with when I got this, and that most people screw up when they get this, because it's the prettiest part. It's the part that the ears care about the most, right out of the gate. And that's the equalization. So let me go ahead and explain what these two are doing. The low frequency detail is essentially a bass enhancer. This is the high frequency detail, which is essentially a treble enhancer. They talk about spectral blah 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 with the fucking high frequency detail. Essentially, you turn this up, you get really, really sibilant if you do it too much. You turn the bass up too much, you get muddy. For those of you that care, this is giving you an 80 hertz boost and cutting at 250 hertz. This one, I can't actually quite remember where this one is configured at, like what frequency this is affecting. All I can really tell you is functionally, it's trying to give you a bit of sparkle on the top end. You know, make sure that you cut through the mix, as it were. But we're going to start off with low frequency detail here. And you're going to notice that when I turn this up, I begin to sound a bit more manly, you know, like get your ass over here. And you would listen because I'm manly. Just kidding. It's not true at all. But once again, you can really overdo it. And that is the case with almost everything on here. There is a way to overdo this stuff. So with this, you know, keep it relatively modest. You know, keep it intelligible. You know, that's the most important thing. And then for your high frequency, some people, you know, I've seen configurations where people will bump this all the way up to 5. And that, to me, is ear-piercing. I hate it. I hate it so much. I prefer the buttery smooth kind of sound. So I like to keep the high-frequency detail relatively contained. You know, I don't want it to get to become too offensive to the ears, but I also do like having a bit of that high-end something, that sparkle, because it does make me easier to hear for my viewers over things like the game that I'm playing and the music that I'm playing. So, yeah, you know, keep it, just keep it, you know, keep it okay, you know. You don't gotta, there's no reason to go too overkill on this stuff. The difference that a little bit, you know, a little goes a long way. That's what I was looking for. That's the best way to put that. Now we'll move over to the gate. So, you probably hear a little bit of line noise right now. There's a little bit there. It's not super loud, but we don't really want it there. That and when I breathe, or if I was chewing on something, nobody wants to fucking hear that. Nobody. So, what we do is we go ahead and, okay, this is going to come off as very unconventional. I just want to make that very clear. But we are live streaming, and we just want shit to work, right? So this might be the one section where I considerably go a bit overkill. But personally, I keep the ratio fairly high, because the ratio basically determines Okay, I guess I'll explain what the gate is. So let's say I bump this up to about right here. So what this is doing is that the gate is saying, okay, negative 30 decibels. Anything beneath that doesn't get to make it to the output section. That's the whole point of it. Now, the ratio, now that tackles, or that determines what the gate is doing to the sounds that don't make it in. So you'll hear. You can hear the noise now. And then it disappears. So one thing that I like to do as well is I will test my S's. You can still hear me breathe as well, which, by the way, that's why I like to keep the ratio very high. I'm still heard. You know, and it hasn't been pointed out to me as being horribly offensive to the ears. My S's are going through. Sometimes you'll have the red-green flicker action, like that. At that point, you know, obviously you want it to green up when you're speaking. That includes consonants. However, it's an imperfect system. You're gonna want to, you know, pay attention to your ears a bit more than the indicators sometimes. You know, that's very important. So that's how I gate my audio. That's how I keep my keyboard noise out of the way. The line noise is gone. It might be a bit overkill on the ratio. I've seen a lot of people that say, you know, you want to be between 1.5 to 1 to 2 to 1. It hasn't worked for me. As far as breath noises, mouth noises are concerned. But I justify this by telling myself, yeah, I'm not a voice actor. I ain't got to worry about shit. I just need this thing to work. And then, of course, your output, if you were, you know, you can fiddle with this a bit. It's essentially, you know, it's a gain knob. You know, you want to boost your levels up a bit, you can go a little bit on there. But most of the time, you don't need to because your interface has its own volume control knob, and it works great. So that is essentially how I configure my DBX 286s. And, you know, I guess as a final note, you know, and I've said this a couple of times, I think, but particularly when you're talking about EQ, this is an important thing to note. The microphone has a native EQ. Your voice has a native EQ. And even the devices you plug the microphone into have an influence on the EQ of the microphone. And I'm emphasizing this because this is the part that people mess up the most. You know, just because everybody else is using the SM7B doesn't mean that you should be using the SM7B or the RE20 or the Q2U. You know, watch as many videos on YouTube or anywhere, Vimeo, if there are any over there anymore, as you can. Try to find people with similar voices to you using this equipment, because it'll help you out in the long run a lot. Because if the microphone and your voice don't agree with each other, most of the time, there's not a lot you can do with a DBX 286s to make it work. You know, if I tried high pass filtering rather, my voice on the Rode Procaster. I'd fiddled with the EQ all that I could. There was nothing that I could do to make myself sound the way that I wanted to sound on there. So research before you buy any audio equipment. That's the most important thing. And, you know, enjoy. Your viewers will thank you. I'll see you guys next time.